This episode of the All About Nothing podcast is sponsored by Soul House Sessions at the Koger Center for the Arts, hosted by Preach Jacobs of the Preach Jacobs podcast. Tickets for April 13th with featured guest, renowned culinary historian, author, and educator Michael Twitty are available now. Visit KogerCenterForTheArts.com or follow at Preach Jacobs on Instagram for details and tickets, or check the show notes. Do it right now. Seriously, hit pause, do it now, because this show will sell out. Soul House at the Koger Center with Preach Jacobs and guest Michael Twitty, April 13th. Do it now before you miss your chance.
The All About Nothing podcast may have language and content
that isn't appropriate for some.
Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, Nothingers, to the All About Nothing podcast. This is episode number 302. I am Barrett Gruber. No Zach again this week. Please subscribe and share the show. That's how we're getting new listeners. Please also consider supporting the show financially by visiting theallaboutnothing.com and becoming an official member and proudly calling yourself a true Nothinger. We'll have more details on that at the end of the show. If you can't do that, please consider giving us a 5-star review, a like, and follow us across all the social media. You can find links at theallaboutnothing.com. I want to thank Brandon Upson for being my guest last week. Brandon, of course, the campaign manager for Brandon P. Brown, who is running campaign to be the Democratic nominee in the November general election. Well, I guess he wants to be the nominee for the general election running as a Democrat. You can find information and links in that episode available now. Again, episode 301. Today, we are leaning into a conversation that is as difficult as it is necessary. Religious trauma is often a silent weight carried by those who have spent years in the walls of organized faiths that, instead of offering sanctuary, created deep-seated wounds. Joining me today is Heather, the host, along with Tamara of the Awakening podcast, having both survived their own experiences with religious trauma and successfully navigating their way out of the restrictive systems that caused it. They now provide a platform for others to share their stories of survival and reclamation. We're going to discuss their personal journeys, the catalysts for starting their show, and how they are helping others break those shackles. Heather, welcome to the All About Nothing podcast. How are you?
I am so good. Thank you for having me here today. And I have to apologize that Tamara is not able to be with us today. She had a little bit of an emergency come up, so I guess you're just stuck with me tonight.
That's okay. We've known each other for a few months now, so I'm not uncomfortable.
No, and life just happens, right? But I am really grateful to be finally getting to sit down and have this conversation with you. I mean, we've talked about it for a little while. We just have such busy schedules. It's really hard to get everybody synced up at the same time. So thank you.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, 100%. So please tell us about yourself. We're going to get into the show and your history and things like that, but give us a little history about you, that where you're at, how you got here.
Okay, well, that's a long story. I was raised a Christian kid. I was raised on the front pew of my daddy's church, and my life was church for 36 years. It was everything to me. Every time the doors were open, we were there. And even when there wasn't service, we were still there. I can remember being 12 years old, waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning to feed homeless people before I'd get on the school bus, because that was part of my dad's ministry as well. He had a homeless shelter, so we would take care of homeless people, and we had a food pantry, so we would take care of that. So my life, very early years, was nothing but a bunch of service, but it was also full of a bunch of trauma, because although my dad was a pastor, he was also a very abusive man. He was not physically abusive towards me, but very mentally and emotionally abusive. So I was broken down a lot in my home, but I was also broken down a lot by my faith. Because you can't teach children that they're born inherently broken without actually breaking them. So I was part of this faith for 36 years, and it literally brought me to the end of myself. And I'm very open about my journey, but my mind literally shattered. I was dealing with the reality of I really wanted to love people. And that's what I had been taught my whole life, is that Jesus was love and that we were to love people without condition. And the older I got, the more different people started coming into my life. Gay people started to come into my life. And that was when I really started to question my beliefs and ask questions and why can't I love these people? Why am I not allowed? God, if you are so good, why can't I just love them? There's nothing wrong with these people. They are good people. And it was those types of conversations and having those types of discussions and just wrestling with my beliefs. And it got to a point where between seeing the hypocrisy of the church and asking these questions and taking them to leadership and just literally being shut down, like, you do not question God. I remember being told that over and over and over again. And it just broke me. It just broke me because really what I wanted to do was love people well. So I stayed some time in a mental hospital. I was there for about a week because for about 10 years straight, I had suicidal thoughts every single day for about 10 years. And that brought me to a place where I was about to end my life. So I checked myself in somewhere so I wouldn't do that. And I was able to get my head back on a little bit straighter. And I always say that leaving the church is a lot like leaving an abusive relationship because you don't realize all the harm that was being done to you while you were in those spaces until you're on the outside looking in. And that's what happened to me when my mind broke because at the time I was being platformed. I was being used by my church for so many different aspects of ministry. They had me teaching kids in children's church. They had me drive in the church van to go places and take the old people to go see Sid Roth in Charlotte. They had me evangelizing and traveling around to preach to people. But when I was broken, I was no longer useful for them. And they didn't know how to help me. And even though they didn't know how to help me, there was people in the church that could. There was people that would have been qualified to help me walk through that season that I was walking through. But because the pastor wanted to do PR and damage control, him and his wife said, yeah, the only people you're allowed to talk to about this is me and my wife. And they were not qualified people to handle this situation. They had no idea how to deal with people that were having mental health problems like I was having. And their solution was just pray about it and seek God more. And don't take your medicine because if you do, you're coming into agreement with the devil. Now, listen, those pills are the only thing that's keeping me alive. So I did not listen to them. But their response was just the nail in the coffin to be the end of my time in that faith. Because I realized that they weren't there for me. They were there for the institution. Mm-hmm. That's all they cared about was protecting the image of the institution. There were people on leadership at that church that did not even know that my mind had shattered because the pastors didn't want anybody to know. They just wanted it covered up and they wanted it to go away because it would make their church look bad. And that was what kind of forced me into my own deconstruction journey. And the very first thing I deconstructed was that homophobic theology. I started studying every bit of doctrine that I could. And then I started studying from some of the top theologians. Now, I had already been to Bible college. I already had a degree in this stuff, okay? But I only had apologetics. That was the only education that I knew. I did not have true theological understanding of the text. And when I started digging in and I learned what they had lied to me about when it came to the doctrines that are used to exclude gay people, I just started peeling back even more layers and dissecting even more of the stuff that they lied to me about. Next thing I went after was hell. And when I dissected hell theology, I was raging mad for a good while because those were the doctrines that had been used to manipulate me for years. Like I was a little girl in church being taught things at 8 years old that if a grown man saw too much skin on my shoulder, that would be my fault if he was to stumble or lust after me. Now, they're telling children that they're responsible for the lust of a pervert. And I look back on this stuff and I am just horrified at the things that we were taught. So, I went through a lot and it took a lot to unpack all of that harm. And I'm still unpacking that harm. Like I have been outside of religious spaces for 8 years now. I'm still going to therapy, unpacking this stuff. And I'm still getting mad about the stuff that they had me spiritually bypass instead of actually walk through and process the way that you're supposed to process them. Like, I was forced into marriage at 16 years old. That is not normal. But in my life, that was normal. And I was taught to treat that as normal. So, it wasn't until I started to deconstruct that I realized, yeah, you're allowed to be mad about that. Your childhood was stolen from you. And it wasn't just that I got married at 16, but I also felt like my job was to have kids, be a wife and a mother. That's what I was trained and raised up to be. That was my only purpose. So I got pregnant for the first time at 16 and a half. I was a child.
Yeah.
My body could not carry that child to term, so it died inside of me. It almost killed me, and I had to have an abortion so I could still be here. And now the same people that walked through me with that season of my life support legislation that takes my rights away. My daughter can't even have the same access to health care that I could when I was her age. My daughter is literally child-free by choice because she is terrified to get pregnant, especially in this state because we have no rights here, And I'm just like, all of this harm, that is really what has led to the creation of The Awakening. My co-host, she came from a very traumatic background as well, and her experience was much, much more extreme than mine was. She came from a Pentecostal holiness background. So women had zero authority, zero voice. Her church that she was part of, everybody in the family was part of that church and ran the church. And any abuse that occurred in that church was handled by the men of the church. And she experienced severe physical, mental, sexual abuse by her spouse. People of the church literally witnessed her being abused in the church parking lot. And when she went to the pastor to tell her pastor what was going on about how she was being abused, they shunned her and set her on the back pew of the church. Now, it wasn't just physical abuse, but they were abusing children too. And the last Sunday that she attended that church, the pastor literally got up on the stage and he said, from now on, any accusations of abuse, whether it be child abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, from this point forward, there will be no discussions between any of you about those types of abuse. The only person you're allowed to talk to about that is the pastor. And nobody else will talk about it, and we will handle it from here on out.
No easier way to cover it up than to...
Yes, and she literally grabbed her kids up that day, kissed her parents, and she looked at them and she said, the God that you're serving is not the God that I was taught to love and serve myself. Kiss your grandbabies goodbye. And she snatched up her babies and she fled with nothing. She had absolutely nothing. She had no money. She had no education, nothing, because she was raised in an environment where women weren't allowed to go to school. They weren't allowed to lead. They had no voice, nothing. She was so sheltered that just literally pop culture references that we would know, she doesn't know them. She did not realize that people like the Beatles and Michael Jackson actually existed in her lifetime because she was so sheltered, because she didn't get to watch TV. She didn't get to read books. They monitored everything that they had access to. And when I grew up, it was similar but not as strict. We were allowed to listen to some secular music, but not all secular music. My parents had to vet it first, right? Same way with movies. Like there were so many things like that most people would know. I didn't know them. Like Pearl Jam? I did not listen to Pearl Jam growing up. I was not allowed. That was sinful. It was the devil's music.
And let me just clarify Pearl Jam. I don't know what Eddie Vedder is saying or singing about or anything. So I can't say it's not the devil's music. I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
mean, it's just it, but this is the environments that we were raised in. So, she left many, many years ago out of the cult. And it took her a long time to unpack and start using her voice. I became vocal a lot quicker than she did about my experiences. And that's just because I was mad. When I first started getting on the internet and talking about what was going on, I was just so mad because of all the harm that was done to me unknowingly, you know? So when I first started making content, that's what it was about. It was about educating people about religious trauma and abuse, what it actually does to people. Because most people aren't aware that religious trauma actually rewires our neural pathways in our brain. It completely changes your brain. It causes things like anxiety, depression, PTSD, rumination, and people that are part of the faith. Just about every Christian experiences rumination. That's when they pray over and over and over again, obsessively. And I remember when I was a Christian, I would do it. I'd just be driving down the road, being terrified that what if I got into an accident? Maybe I was going to die and go to hell. So I'd just sit there, oh God, please forgive me for all my sins, just in case, just in case. And I would obsess over it like that because I was so scared all the time. Like I lived in a state of fear. My nervous system was never at rest until I left those spaces. And I really did. I started talking about it. I started making content. I started educating about it. And that's when I started to form a community. And the more that I started to connect with other people that were survivors, that was when I was like, we need to do something to share their stories. We need to get their voices out there so they can tell the stories of what it is that they've been through. Because people don't think we're serious. They think we're just making this stuff up. And I have heard some of the most egregious stories from people that have been on our show that have experienced this abuse. It's not made up. Like the people are real, the stories are real. So that's why I wanted to create the show. And I couldn't have picked a better person to create the show with because T has been through so stinking much. And to be a person to have experienced all the things that she has and just be so kind, so gracious, so loving to so many people is just so admirable to me. So we make a really good team. And we make people feel really comfortable too, because it's just like people sitting around a table just talking,
Yeah. And I can speak to what it is you bring to the community because you are a part of the Big Media LLC group, along with Bill Kemmler, Dr. Jamil, and me, Preach Jacobs. So, we have a group that ultimately, I think, has so much diversity to it that anyone could listen to my show and be like, "Oh, he's a numbskull." I mean, I'm borderline idiot when it comes to like news and politics and things like that because I have my opinions and sometimes they differ from the left and sometimes they differ from the right, and I'm all over the place because I consider myself to be a reality.
Yeah,
I enjoy listening to your show. And enjoy is a weird word in respect to that because the people that you all have on your show have such traumatic, I mean, the experiences that they have and how they've turned those experiences either into something that they survive off of or they try to, like you all, help others get through their trauma or at least recognize their trauma. Also, real quick, what was it? Pentecostal? What was the Pentecostal church again that she was in?
Pentecostal Holiness.
Holiness. Those are the angels on the ceiling people, right?
They're the like glory bun skirts down to your ankles.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they, I think, because I had a friend who used to convince me to try and come to his church. And he said, if you accept it, you'll see angels on the ceiling. And I was like, and I have been sans church for probably, I want to say probably in the range of 10 to 12, 15 years.
Yeah.
I was completely religiousless for most of my childhood. My parents never forced us to go to church. Maybe on occasions we'd go if my father had a business partnership with a church. If he owned a print shop, my mother owned a print shop, and if, let's say, they were printing the bulletins,
Yeah.
then we would go to that church for
Yeah.
a few weeks, whatever. And here's a secret: we were just running them off a copier. So my mother's going to hate that. Although I don't know my mother. My mother may not have owned the print shop at the time when he was doing that. But so regardless, so I've never had a real attachment to any sort of a faith. Now, my first marriage, I did convert to Catholicism because I thought of all of the religions, I felt as though Catholicism had an attachment to the traditions that I believed that if Jesus's existence was real, they seemed to be the ones that follow along in an almost literal fashion of his traditions, his covenants and things like that. So I felt like that was the closest one. But even through my conversion, even through going through like RCIA and becoming Catholic, I always felt like there was a disconnect from reality when it came to what the Catholic Church professed versus their actions. What you constantly heard about in the news and the abuse of children in the church by as high up as priests and cardinals and bishops and things like that. And so that was always a struggle. And when I went through my first divorce, I decided that I was going to try and connect a little bit closer to the Catholic Church. So I did things to make sure, one, I didn't get excommunicated, which is, by the way, a really dumb, stupid thing to be even worried about. And then as well, it was thinking that was a community that was going to support me. And I was friends with the priest. We used to play poker on Friday nights. And my deacon was just an exceptional human being. I didn't ever get the sense at all that they were capable of the things that I heard reported in the news.
Yeah.
But I also didn't hear them speak out against it. And because of that, I found myself pulling further and further away from the church. I really had a difficult time accepting the magic part of it. I always had a hard time with that. And do I believe that there was a Jesus Christ? I think there was. I think that there was someone who put the people in power on trial. I think that he lived. I think that there was an individual that lived a life trying to better everyone else's lives and convince them that by being kind, by trying to take care of people that need to be taken care of, that by giving yourself to your community, I think that there was someone that did try and do that, and that went against everything that the Romans stood against. The Jewish people, or the Jewish leadership, was so heavily involved in making as much money as they possibly could. They were doing the things that some of the evangelicals are doing now, and ultimately he died for the fact that they considered what he was doing, his actions, as being a sin. The magic part is hard for me to attach myself to, but also the organizational structure of purely based on my own theology. Whether I took theology in college, I've read the Bible 7 times, 8 times, something like that. And a lot of the things that churches do nowadays, outside of the abuse, outside of the things that harm people, the attachments that they have to some of the things that make them a church, aren't in the Bible. Like these aren't things that are a reality in the readings, but somehow they manipulate it into with the message that they give to their the people that attend their churches, parishioners. I almost call them. That's a Catholic thing. But they convince them that everything you see is part of the whole thing, and it's not. So it was. So but I never suffered any trauma, but I knew it was going on. I didn't know anyone that was going through it or that had escaped from it.
Yeah.
So.
And it was the same way. Like when I started deconstructing, I was out here on my own. Like I did not know that there were deconstruction spaces. I didn't know that there were people that were out here talking about, having walked away from their beliefs because, where I came from, you don't walk away from God. You don't walk away from the Christian faith. This is the only life you know. So when we first started deconstructing, there was nothing, like nothing. It wasn't until COVID hit that was when I found a group online on Facebook, and I was so excited because it was the first time I had found other people that were talking about these same topics, that were doing the work, and it's so eye-opening when you're around people like that because you see how much you were sheltered from or kept from knowing in the first place from the church, or how harmful some of the things that you were taught were. Like, purity culture is a great one, okay, because kids are raised in purity culture when they're raised in the church, which is the idea that you don't have sex until you're married. But with purity culture, young boys are taught like masturbation is sinful, God is watching you masturbate, which is so messed up. And then their youth group leaders will actually sit down and have talks with them about, have you been touching yourself? How much you been touching yourself? It is not appropriate.
No, that is so inappropriate.
These are grown adults that are sexualizing children, and that's exactly what purity culture is. And we tell it like it is. Purity culture is rape culture because you're literally telling young girls that they're responsible for the thoughts, feelings, and actions of young men. And they're supposed to expect these young men to be attracted to them. They are already taught to be used to that. So when it does happen, they're like, oh yeah, I was taught about this. I'm so powerful. I brought this young man to his knees. It's my fault. And we actually had somebody on our show. She was raped from the time that she was 4 until she was 18.
Gosh.
Now, she was raped by her brother. Okay. Her brother. And when she got pregnant by the brother, the pastor put her up on the stage and shamed her for being a whore and having sex outside of marriage.
She didn't have any control over that.
She had no control over it. No control over it. And they wonder why people deconstruct, but
even if she had, okay, so what age did she get pregnant?
She was 17 when she got pregnant.
17 when she got pregnant.
had her son, but.
And her son is her brother's child.
Yes.
But she had been being sexually assaulted
since she was 4.
4 years old.
4 years old.
First of all, I don't intend. So I think that there's. I attribute a lot of people's behavior when it is like in this situation to the same thing as like smoking and drinking. There's a disease.
Yes.
And that disease isn't being treated. And so for anyone that is causing that harm to especially a child, but any woman that isn't acting out of in a way of consent, it is it's extremely disturbing, but there is no control by the person being assaulted, especially if she has no pathway to be able to find some sort of resolution to it. If she can't go to her parents or the pastors of the church.
Yep.
I mean,
she
at that point,
she went to her parents and her mother told her, "Why are you lying? Why would you make up things about your brother?"
Lying?
Yeah. And now listen, it gets even worse because the brother did not get in trouble for doing this to her. He ends up getting with somebody else that has a young daughter, and he hurts that woman's daughter. He ends up going to prison. Okay. Well, he comes out of prison and he changes his name. Guess what he does for a living now?
Please tell me he's not the pastor of a church.
He's a pastor.
Fucking A. All right.
So this is why we have the Awakening podcast, to shine light on things like this, because this isn't just a one-off situation. This is not a one-off situation. Last year, I covered a story about a young man. He was molested for years by a priest within the Catholic Church. Well, that priest never got in trouble. They just shipped him from one church to another church, because that's what they do when they get in trouble. Well, that man had a child.
Same as the Catholics.
Yeah, well, this man has a child, and his child started getting sexually assaulted by that same priest. Well, when the child learned that this is the same priest that had molested his dad, the child killed the priest in a very vulgar, gruesome way. Yeah. But again,
Is there an article I can put in the show notes?
I could definitely find you an article. I could definitely share with you.
And I'm going to be honest. I'm not the type of person that in reality or in real life roots for the vigilantes. Sometimes you need a comic book hero.
But when it's something like that, like it's generational, where you're not just hurting this man, you're hurting that man's offspring. Like, it's sickening.
It's disgusting.
And it was, 4 years ago, the Southern Baptist Convention, the largest religious organization in the South, released a report that had over 800 names on it of pastors that had been arrested for harming children, and not a single Christian that I had been in church with all those years said a word about that report. No posts on social media. Now, these are the same people that will tell me I'm going to hell for supporting abortion, but when it comes to pedophilia, they will not say a word about it. They won't say a word about it.
No, and also just to express a little bit further into the Southern Baptist Church, organization, revealing like they did us a favor.
Yeah.
Names of victims and people that created these victims. They also acknowledged that there's at least twice as many that they haven't released yet.
Yep. And, it was the Assemblies of God or the Church of God. Don't quote me because it's one of the two, but there was just a news report that was released about 5 or 6 months ago saying the same thing. They've been covering it up for about 50 years. The Catholic Church, if you Google them, there are several different dioceses that have went completely bankrupt because they've had to pay out for all the scandals.
Los Angeles.
There is now sexual abuse insurance that these churches carry.
Yeah.
They have insurance for this. And these are the same people that will point the finger at the LGBTQIA plus community and tell them that they're going to hell and they're going to burn forever while they have a pedophile behind their pulpit on Sunday morning.
I have insurance for my home because I know the possibility of getting hit with hail or wind damage is going to happen.
Yeah.
You get insurance for what you know is likely going to happen. The idea that you are hiring people that you know you are likely going to have to pay out in some settlement to a family is insane to me. Like, you plan for that.
Yeah, and people will always ask, well, how do they get away with it? It's because they always do internal investigations. They're always having their own people investigate them.
A lot of detectives.
And when that happens, my dad, he has his own church. He has handpicked his board members on his church. So whenever something goes up for a vote, if you don't vote in the way he wants you to, he'll have his board members vote you off the board.
Right.
That's how these people stay in power. If you don't agree with the man in charge, you don't have a voice anymore. You get the boot. And they'll put somebody else in there that will be a yes man.
Yeah.
That's all they want. And it's so corrupt.
Well, let me ask you this. So for organized religion often provides a ready-made identity. When you left, how did you go about rediscovering who you were outside of that framework?
It was hard. And I always tell people there are two different types of people that will leave high control religion. You'll have people that are kind of just like they're 20 years old and they're sowing their wild oats all over again. They are hyper into everything that they didn't get to experience. And then you have other people that are totally the opposite. They're kind of like the Eeyore, just kind of let me just gently dip my toe in this because there's so much fear around things. I know some people that didn't even have their first drink of alcohol until they were in their 30s because they were afraid that they were going to go to hell for having a sip of beer, you know? But then there are other people that will leave the church and they're like, oh, give me all the beers, you know? So for me, though, it was hard. I was a shut-in for a little while. I had to do a lot of processing by myself. And I'm always honest about that because when you leave a high control religious space, you have the entire world just shatters. It crumbles. Because when you're in those spaces, everything is predicted for you. You're told from birth who you're supposed to be, how you're supposed to show up in the world, you know, how you're supposed to speak even. You're supposed to be seen, but not heard. You're allowed to speak, but your voice is supposed to be low and your head's supposed to be lower. So when you come out of these spaces, you have to learn how to be your authentic self. And you don't even know who that is.
Yeah.
So you have to learn how to connect with who you really are. And for me, it was just discovering things that I like. Like, what kind of music does Heather actually like? Because I had no idea. I didn't know what kind of music I really liked. I didn't even know what my favorite color was. Like, just because my mind was so set on what it is that I was supposed to be, that I never thought of who I really am. So it's been a process of just discovering, you know, little things about myself. I know my favorite color is red now, and I love rock music. That's like my favorite genre of music. So, but my
That's
music
good.
tastes are like a collection of a little bit of everything that I picked up over the years. But I say, you know, for people that are leaving high control religious spaces, therapy is your best friend. You need it. You need therapy because your brain has been wired to self-sabotage at every corner. You have been wired to doubt yourself, to not trust yourself, to not think that you are capable of doing things on your own or making decisions for yourself. And going to therapy really does help you reclaim your own autonomy, but realizing that you have inherent worth, you have inherent value, you're not broken, you never were damaged, you know, and you have to learn how to rewire those things in your brain that were broken, you know, because when you're, again, taught that you can't trust yourself, and that's really messes you up, especially when it comes to life and big decisions and stuff like that, because you'll always second guess yourself. Like, should I have moved to South Carolina? Should I have taken that job? Oh no. What if I should have done this instead of that? And you have all kinds of fear wrapped around that. So you have to work that out and to unpack it. And there's going to be a lot of anger and stuff that comes with it too, because the more you realize how harmful the people are that you had before thought were, you know, kind of the safest people that you could ever be around, it takes a lot to process that too, because you have to realize that those people are a product of their beliefs. And even though they're causing harm, they don't intend to most of the time. I don't believe they intend to do it. They believe they're doing what's right. But that still doesn't mean that you can remove them from being accountable for the harm that they're causing, you know?
Yeah.
So it's a big process.
How did your deconstruction affect the relationship with your family, especially with your father being in charge of a church?
We don't speak anymore.
Okay. And it's probably healthy.
Yeah,
That's
it is.
healthy.
I had to basically make choices. I have several family members that are still super conservative Christian. They're still really harmful with their beliefs. And my father has done a lot of harm, not just with his faith, but just who he is. He's an abusive human being. So me being on this healing journey, I know that I can't have him in my life because he's a harmful person that won't take accountability for the harm that he's caused. He won't stop causing harm. So yeah, he's just not part of our lives anymore. We have new family now. We have chosen family.
Yeah.
We've had to rebuild a little differently.
Yeah. I can see exactly why
Yeah.
that would be necessary. Is there a difference in your mind between just a bad religious experience and what is actual religious trauma?
There is a difference because there are some people that will just have, there is a big difference. Religious trauma is something that truly impacts you. It literally does. It gives you anxiety, depression, PTSD, like I'm talking significant trauma. You're living with, fear, like sleep paralysis, all kinds of stuff. You're seeing things. I think of it this way. Have you ever seen the videos of people that are flopping around on the floor in a church service? Those are people that are suffering religious psychosis, okay? So there's a big difference between that and then just going to a church and a pastor saying something that hurts your feelings, you know? Religious trauma is something that stays with you. It's woven into the fiber of who you are. It changes everything about who it is that you should have been. And you have to live with that. Like, even though I am on a healing journey, there are still parts of what have been, implanted in me from that faith that are still coming out all these years later, because it becomes part of who you are. So it takes a lot to undo all of that damage.
It's crazy to me in my head. And we talked a little bit about this, I think, before we started recording, but I operate basically on a path that is have as little negative impact on everyone around you as possible.
Yeah.
Only react in a way that is, if necessary, purely to protect yourself or your children. And one of the things that came out of the No Kings protest in Greenwood this past weekend was that a man drove past them and
he
out of the window. Yeah, he sprayed pepper spray at protesters, children.
Yes.
Mind you, college age, in my mind, of children. And I can't fathom why that would be someone's reaction, just a visceral, angry reaction to seeing someone that you disagree with their actions.
Yeah.
It's a weird reaction to me. And then I think about what others go through with their religious trauma. And as an adult who has children, who has neighbors that have children, the idea of causing harm to them just to get my satisfaction is another weird reaction. Like it's a weird behavior, and I don't know if I just don't have those synapses connected to understand what it is they're doing or why they're doing it. But it's the same as someone that goes to a bar with the intention of putting something in somebody's drink to try and to put them in a state where they have no control.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I don't understand that behavior, because why would I want to be with someone who probably doesn't want to be with me? It doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. And, there are people that, there are some people that are in the deconstruction community that have just woken up from just the cognitive dissonance and been like, you know what, this is just bullshit. Boom, I'm out. They don't really have a lot of trauma, but there are a lot of us that we grew up in this, when you're restricted on what it is that you can watch, what you can read, what kind of music you can listen to. First of all, you're being raised in a cult.
Yeah.
And when you can't question your parents or the leader or ask questions about the God that you're serving, again, you're in a cult. And after a while, that does significant damage. Like, I remember being taught that I was to be pure until I got married, but I didn't even know what the freak purity was. I was SA'd at 8 years old and didn't even know what was happening to me because I wasn't taught about my body, because my parents were too afraid to teach me about sex. So when my mom sat me down 2 years later to have that chat with me, I learned, I was a piece of garbage already because my purity had been stolen from me. Because I was taught that if my purity, I gave it away, I was like a piece of chewed up gum. So I thought I was garbage. I was absolutely worthless and nobody was ever going to want me. And then even when I did get engaged, my brother told me that I had to tell my fiance what had happened to me when I was 8, just in case he didn't want to marry me, because I wasn't pure anymore. This is how we were raised. As
an 8-year-old, who can you go to? Because how do you go to the police?
And I didn't even have the language. I didn't know what was freaking happening to me. I didn't know what sex was. Nobody had ever told it to me. I was so sheltered that I had no idea what was happening.
God,
no clue. Not a clue. And that's one of the things that I get mad about. I get really mad about purity culture because purity culture keeps kids from not knowing about their body. It keeps kids from not knowing what good touch is and bad touch is because parents are so afraid to teach their children about their bodies. They're afraid to teach their children they are allowed to tell an adult no if they are being touched, because that's another thing in religious spaces. You are taught to trust anybody in a position of authority and never question them. Well, my God, you are setting children up to be abused.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a man who tried to groom me when I was a kid, but my dad caught on to it before it was too late. I was one of the lucky ones, but not everybody is that lucky. And again, it's the system that sets them up for that. So that's why, we wanted to start the show, start interviewing people, start sharing the stories, because people don't realize how harmful this stuff is. We've had conversion torture survivors that have been on our show. The things that they do to these gay kids in conversion therapy, they call it therapy, but it's actually torture. It is torture. Like they literally will have them smelling feces while they're watching gay porn to try and convert them from being gay. Like it is so messed up, the things that they do to these young men. And again, this is all supposed to be for God to make them better. And it does not. It just damages them. There was a young man that was on our show. They were going to give him electrotherapy.
Yeah, I remember
And he
that.
was like, nope, I'm not doing it. I am not doing it. And I was like, I don't blame you, buddy. I wouldn't either.
let me take a break from this just to say, if you're listening to this and ultimately it sounds like something that has happened to you, or you feel like you, a podcast listener, have had some of this trauma, please check out the Awakening podcast because it releases weekly on Wednesdays. You and Tamara have some of the most phenomenal guests, and their stories are just shocking. So I just want to make sure that people knew. You can find it's on all the podcast platforms, and you can find shorts and such on YouTube and Facebook and social media. So do that. Follow them. There are links in the show notes for everything. So let me ask you some of this. With your guests, what is one of the common threads that you see as far as are there universal symptoms of?
Yes.
Yeah.
The number one thing, and we actually had a therapist on our show, and he said it's the number one thing that he deals with too, is shame. People have the hardest time being able to look themselves in the mirror and say, you're pretty cool. I'm all right with you. I am a good person fundamentally, because that is the number one thing that you're taught from birth within religious spaces, is that you're born broken. And you're taught that your righteousness, which is all the good that you could ever do, is like filthy rags, which they're talking about filthy period rags in that scripture. So no matter how good you are, no matter what great things you do, what you achieve, how many people you help, that's nothing but a filthy period rag.
You're just disappointing
garbage.
God.
You're just absolute garbage. So that is the number one recurring thing, is people having to learn how to love themselves. And it was the first thing that I had to learn. I was 40 years old before I could look myself in the mirror and be like, you know what? I love you. You're all right. You're a pretty okay person. 40 years old.
Better than me. I still can't do that. I look in the mirror and I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Hey, I still say that sometimes too.
Take this to your therapist.
But it just, that is the most recurring thing, is people unpacking that shame, because that shame permeates into every aspect of their life. They don't go as far in their career because they don't feel like they're capable of doing what it is that they're capable of. Like, if I could just tell people, you are so much more brilliant than you think you are. You can go so much further than what you ever could possibly think. Like, you are fully capable of doing incredible things, and you're not garbage. You are never garbage. You are incredible. I think everybody deserves to know that about themselves, because it is so messed up for people to be taught that they are fundamentally messed up. So
Yeah, absolutely agree. As an advocate, do you go through like compassion fatigue? Do you feel, what does it take to recharge the batteries that
I have to take time off. I do have to take time off. And I have a few friends that I talk to that are really, really incredible people that I can go to when things get heavy, and there are sometimes, like we did have that, one guest that said that they had a horrific childhood and everything that they went through. And honestly, that was one I had to work out with my therapist a little bit, just to be honest with you, because these are real stories, but they're life-changing. And, we were talking in the beginning about how has it changed me sitting and hearing these stories. And the number one thing is it has solidified my resolve to never enter religious spaces again. Because week after week, story after story, it's like these people keep me out of those spaces because I know the harm that they are causing. What's being inflicted upon completely innocent people. And I can't call any of that good anymore. So we just got to keep trucking on. We got to keep sharing the stories, keep shining the light on the harm, because it's through our stories, and I say it every week on our show, but we're healing loudly together, one story at a time.
Yeah.
Because the more that we talk about it, the more people are aware of what's really happening behind closed doors. Because for so long, people were afraid to talk about it. We were told, even within those spaces, that we were never allowed to question the man of God, that it was dangerous to do so, that honestly, we would be in fear of hell if we challenged or questioned or said anything bad about the man of God. And people are at the point now where we're tired of being silent. It's time for all this to come out into the light, all of this harm. Like, you can't sit there and traumatize people in the name of your faith and keep calling that good anymore, because people are dying because of this. Like, they're literally committing suicide because of this. So it's serious.
I think one of the things that I also take away from your show is that leaving that faith institution doesn't mean you're abandoning your moral compass.
No.
It doesn't mean, in fact, leaving it actually, to me, winds up what I hear from some of your guests is that it actually points their moral compass in the direction that is going to benefit the people around them the most.
Yes, absolutely. And I find that, a lot of the people that do come out, they are like me and T, like they go into advocacy of some kind. They either write or they start nonprofits or whatever. They get involved with other organizations because they really want to help people. And the reality is that we sat in religious spaces for all this time that pretended to help people but didn't do shit. Like, I was in churches for 36 years and didn't do shit to help people that entire time. And now I do more to help people every single day than I ever did in those spaces, because there's hope. There's hope that there is healing after this harm. There's hope that you can find community, that you can find your own family even if you have to, because that's another thing that people don't realize. When you walk out of these places, you're not just walking away from a church. You're not just walking away from a building. You're walking away from your entire community. Sometimes your entire family too, because if your entire family's part of that building, you're walking away from a lot. So when people say, oh, you just left to sin more, I promise you I didn't. I left so I could be a better person. And being part of that just made me a bitter person instead.
Yeah. Define what your sin is. Like,
God, if you're a Christian, anything they don't like is a sin, you know?
Yeah.
Like anything
it's not clearly
that they
defined in any manual or anything.
But it literally has just become anything that they don't like, they will call a sin. Because, they'll call, secular music sinful. They'll call the color red's demonic. Like, it's crazy. They will demonize anything. And I say this too, they always worry about shit that doesn't matter. Like the color red, or Lady Gaga's performance she did at the Grammys, or something stupid like that. Or, the Monster Energy can is like a demonic symbol. But they don't care about children being raped in churches. They don't
Right.
care about that. They don't care about what's happening to, migrants in our country right now, for God's sakes. They don't care that women are bleeding out in emergency room parking lots because they're being denied abortive care. Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Get your priorities in order.
Absolutely. Put some eyes on the things that are actually
Yes.
important versus the things that make you uncomfortable.
Yes.
And that's a message I would speak that message to Republicans. I would speak that message to Democrats. Make the things that are important or make the things that actually have teeth. Make those things important, not the things that just make you uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
I hope somebody out there is listening. Last question I want to ask. You are a reverend in
Yes, I
the
am.
Celtic Christian Church.
Okay, so I actually have just recently left the Celtic Christian Church.
Okay.
And it's nothing against them. It's just because I wanted to be out from underneath an institution and be on my own little spiritual path.
Okay.
It helps people more. I think it opens me up to be able to minister to more people that are deconstructing. I am an interfaith minister, so I'm spiritual, not religious. And I cater to the deconstructing, the spiritually wounded and curious, and people that are looking for non-traditional, minister. Like, if you want to go get married with the fairies in the forest, I'm your lady. I'll be the
There
one
you
to
go.
be there, I obviously do LGBTQIA plus weddings and funerals and things like that. But yeah, I'm here for people that are asking questions. I am not here to point you towards any dogmatic belief. That is not my job. My job is just to guide you on whatever path you're on and to be here to support you as you're unpacking whatever it is you're walking through and whatever season you're in right now. So
Whatever that's it's the, ultimately it comes down to just doing good and
Yes.
and not having an automatic response to other people that is just prejudicely negative.
Yes. I always try to look for the humanity in people because you know what? I can always find something wrong with you, but I want to find something right with you instead. Where's the goodness? Because everybody's got something good. Everybody, even the most meanest son of a bitch you've met, you'll find something good in there somewhere.
Yeah.
You have to look for it, though.
Last question I want to ask you. If you could have one of Jesus's magical powers, what would it be?
I'd heal people, I would say. I'd heal people because,
I think
so many people get sick all the
Yeah.
time and, babies dying of cancer and stuff like that. And it's one of the reasons why I know that Jesus's miracles aren't still being performed today, because if they were, Christians would go to the hospitals all the time. We wouldn't even have hospitals,
Right.
but
Right.
I want people to not be sick. Like, I hate it when people are sick. I hate being sick.
I want to kill fig trees just on a whim. This fig tree pisses
Curse
me
you.
off. I just want to, yeah, exactly.
You know,
would be my
that tree
Jesus
was out
power.
of season. That's why it wasn't
That's
producing
right.
fruit. Like,
Exactly right.
cursing a tree for not acting the way it's not supposed to.
Yeah, I still have profoundly an issue with that specific story. I feel like which one of the apostles was the one that wrote that one?
I don't remember.
Either way, I think he had an axe to grind with Jesus. I don't think Jesus killed a fig tree for no reason.
Listen, there's another story in there about some kids picking on a bald dude. So God sent a pack of bears to maul these teenage kids.
Yeah.
And it's like, because they were picking on a bald guy, you murdered children for bragging on some dude? Like, come on.
Yeah. Greatest work of fantasy,
Fiction.
I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. Greatest work of fiction ever sold.
Well, listen, the biggest thing I want people to take away from this is that the Awakenings podcast is available every Wednesday morning to download, listen to. Please subscribe to the podcast with Heather and Tamara, because they are doing an exceptional job. Bill and I were speaking about it this weekend, just how fantastic a job you all are doing with the show, and it's amazing. I don't know how you don't walk away from it every time you record just going, it would put me in a home. Ultimately, I think it would. if I
Well,
had to
I'm
go.
just grateful that, people trust us enough to be able to share these things with us because
Yeah.
they are the bravest people I've ever met in my life. And I'm just so grateful for them. It takes a lot to be able to use your voice like that. And I got to shout them out because they're just amazing people. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you for what you do. Please thank Tamara for us because I think that her story is exceptional and her journey is even more exceptional. So,
and thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, honestly, anytime. And this wasn't one of the, and before anybody is like, Barrett just had one of his podcast guest hosts on. No, it's not the case. This is, legitimately, it's something that I wanted to do for a while. And
we've just been busy.
Yeah, that's what happens. That's what happens. Well, again, subscribe to the Awakening podcast, again, available every single Wednesday. From Big Media LLC, you guys do such a fantastic job. Thank you very much, Heather, for being on with me this week. It's going to do it for this episode, number 302. Links to all of our past episodes, podcast platforms, merchandise, and social media are available on our webpage, theallaboutnothing.com. And if you think our financial model of giving away free content and entertainment is silly and you're in the giving mood, why not become an official Nothinger and support the show? Members get early access to this episode as well as an exclusive content. Visit members.theallaboutnothing.com or find the link on our webpage. You can also give a one-time donation through the same link. If you'd like to be a part of the show, you can call and leave us a message, 803-672-0533, or email the show at theallaboutnothing.com. You can also join our Discord server, links found on our webpage. Thank you for listening, everybody. You all stay safe, be kind, and
keep your hands to yourself.
The All About Nothing podcast is a product of Big Media and produced and engineered by me, Barrett Gruber. Thanks to Cake for our intro music, Sick of You. You can follow Everything Cake, the band, at cakemusic.com. Thanks to Muff, the producer, for our outro music. You can follow Muff on Instagram at Muff the Producer. You can follow me across social media by visiting Linktree/Barrett Gruber. And you can follow Zach King on Linktree/AAN Zach. Want to support the show? Visit our webpage, theallaboutnothing.com, and become a member. There are several tiers available that give you early access to episodes as well as exclusive content. To find links to our social media, podcast platforms, and merchandise to support the show, as well as past episodes, visit theallaboutnothing.com. If you'd like to be a part of the show, you can email theshow@theallaboutnothing.com, or you can call our number and leave a message. Dial 803-672-0533. If the time between these episodes is more than you can handle, check out our sister shows. What the Pod Was That with Carrie, Zach, and myself. Welcome to Wonderland with Ami. Politically Speaking with Erica, Kirsten, and Emily. And Black, White, and Blue in the South with Dr. Jameel Brooks and Bill Kimmler. Please subscribe and share this show. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe and punch that notification bell. Thank you for listening, and hear us next week. The preceding podcast is solely owned by the host or hosts and is distributed by Big Media LLC. Copyright 2026.